Hi everyone, this is Karak from Angry Centaur Gaming. Today I'm bringing you the review for Ori and the Blind Forest, a game that merges the already well-documented and magical acrobatic abilities of the fennec fox with the stylings and color palette of Rayman. Then someone came along and said, you know what, this game is missing something, and rubbed 1980s neon and super saturation filters all up in its private creases, so deep they couldn't film it legally. Ori is an exclusive for the Xbox One created by Moon Studios, whom I assume all live in magical places where all forest life's been crossed with jellyfish. Ori is a platformer through and through, which means it will live and die on the accuracy of movement, the ability of the game to inform the player of the environment through graphical and sound cues, and of course, the most important thing, which is showing just how badass a Casper the Friendly Ghost Fennec Fox crossbreed would actually be. Let's get to it. Remember, this review is caffeinated, which means delivered without delay into your ear holes with no respect for breath or listener safety. Graphics are up first. This is probably the first time my eyes have ever had sex. Actually, maybe it's the second time. Maybe my eyes went out without me one time. And then there's also Rayman, which is probably at least second base. Listen, the game is very clearly aimed at anyone who ever said, man, a ghostly fennec fox shooting fireballs or running around a land that inhabits that place in the back of your mind where beauty and terror slam into one another like footballers after a touchdown would probably look pretty cool, don't you think? And the developers agreed, and the hand-painted look, the beautiful crisp and informative animations, and the contrasting color depths between the land and some of the enemies gives the game a texturized feel that is implied but never forced. Shadows lose the battle to colored lighting as particles spit up from neon-soaked enemies, where the projectiles just sort of lazily fly across the level like everyone's somewhat interested in killing you but isn't super excited about it just yet. That's not to say the world isn't dangerous, because it is, but many times the glow-in-the-dark things, the things that look so spectacular and alien, aren't where the true danger lies, and I'll get to that in a moment. Graphically, every single enemy, as well as the title character and those of his ilk, all feel completely natural in the world. Everything has a feel and a look to it that sits solidly in the expectations that the environment gives you, leaving nothing out of place. Glow-in-the-dark fox, yep. And what makes perfect sense next to a glow-in-the-dark fox is a glow-in-the-dark, possibly inebriated spider that seems to be perfectly happy swinging around on its web like it's three sheets in the wind and just hanging out to see the next cool thing you're going to do, and only occasionally trying to shoot you to death. You know, as the game progresses, there's an almost wicked use of color to identify the locations you're traveling through, and though not easily discerned on first glance, there are moments of sublime perfection where color reflects off of the environment, ripples across the darkness of an underground pool, and somehow makes you think you're playing a fucking painting. Admittedly, there are times where the graphics can actually increase the game's difficulty. While the world is organic and beautiful, it is also at times a bit deceiving when it comes to where you are safe, where you're not safe, and when you should jump versus when you're on safe ground and should stay there. Many Bothan lives were lost when a level had a jump with some of those damn sticky needle plant things at the edge of the jump, and despite it looking like I was nowhere near them, my little fennec would explode into an orgasmic shower of colored particles without warning because somehow I had just got too close to them. As we all know, in all platformers with more organic tile sets, this kind of issue always rears its ugly head, and it's up to the game to mitigate those problems until they are at an acceptable level to the gamer. I feel that this game does do that fairly well. Lastly, the world lives and breathes. This game has so many levels of background and foreground animation that you would swear an entirely different game was being played overlapped with Ori. Everything moves, everything shivers in the wind, water cascades off blurred out rocks in the distance, creatures shamble in the foreground, keeping a keen eye on the main character. It's simply fantastic layering and adds a level of detail rarely seen in other platformers, and that includes the big dogs like Rayman. In fact, as worldviews go, Ori is probably my new favorite when it comes to making the world feel alive without being transparent in the attempt to do so. Overall, I would say the graphics are outstanding, even if sometimes that meant losing a life because of colored explosion-y reasons I couldn't possibly explain. Up next is sound, music, and voice. You know, the sound is sublime, whether you're double or triple jumping, leaping into the water, smashing face first into a snail covered in spikes because it sounded like fun to you, or just sprinting full speed through the game's painting-like backgrounds and throwing fireballs at enemies. Every sound does what it's supposed to, masterfully. In a platformer, well-done sounds can be the difference between life and death, and here in Ori, the sound works as both an accompaniment to the gameplay, as well as a supportive brace for times when the gamer is assaulted with insanely hard jumps, projectiles flying towards their face, and a color spectrum that is damn cam, near, close to infrared. It's perfect, but with just the right number of effects to keep the actions immersed in the present, while leaving room for environmental sound effects to be heard clearly. This means that the direct actions of the character in the foreground and the background sounds of the ambient world mix perfectly. We've all played some 2D platformer where the character feels pasted into the game world. Many times that's done due to the audio cues and the overall tonal reflections just not matching up accurately enough to give the gamer the impression of being there, right there in the middle of the screen. Ori does this insanely well, never for a moment leaving me to question if the world and the character were inhabiting the same world space. Up next is music. Someone finally gets it. I don't know who, but someone out there finally understands that not every stirring track has to be led by music that sounds like it came out of Michael Bay's pants during a Transformers release party. The music here is a sublime mix between leading pianos and dueling wind instruments. Just when you think you have the overall cadence of the track down, the musicians throw in haunting chimes and almost technotronic flutter effects, resulting in what is easily for me the best soundtrack in the last couple years. Yeah, I know, there are a ton of games out there, and you guys know I liked Remember Me and a couple other titles, but the music is simply phenomenal here. The soundtrack in this game, whether it's moving from the Far East influenced wind instruments to what sounds like Pahoo drums like you would expect at a Hawaiian luau, is simply utterly airy and fantastic. At times, music exists above the gameplay, almost like it's there and there's a separate space for all the game's sounds and actions. Then, when something important happens, the complexity increases from piano solos with xylophone partnering all the way to full-blown orchestra pieces. It's right about here when someone watching this review might say, but Karak, that's what all games do. No, not by a long shot. There's a particular symbiotic relationship between action, locations, and music that many games can only dream of that occurs here. If you've ever seen a picture and you suddenly thought of music to go with it, that is what Ori is at its very core, an almost instinctual matching of location, action, atmosphere, and music all in one. Up next, of course, is voice. Though the denizens of Ori don't speak English, in fact the main narrator speaks like a blazed up whale rhyming into the bottom of a 55-gallon barrel, the meaning of situations is easily discerned. All the voices are made up and put through an assortment of acoustical filters until you're left with what's sort of a native feeling of what's being said or experienced. Pain is easy to identify by the sharpness of the sound. Sadness is reflected in Ori's low vocal murmurings when faced with particular events that drive the story. Everything is done perfectly, though at times the big narrator voice did come across a bit samey from time to time. Everything overall was done well. Gameplay. In Ori, you jump, flip, swim, fireball, drop, wall climb, teleport, and smash the shit out of everything as you progress through the level. To avoid spoilers, I'm going to be purposefully ambiguous here. Let's just say Ori finds himself alone in a harsh world and must set things right by using unlockable skills to gather various artifacts from around the forest. I'm not going to get into much of the story. However, this isn't just your typical platformer, and in a way that's reflected almost from the start of the game. You don't personally have the ability to attack anyone, except when you land on a flower that occasionally poops out a blue crystal you shove down your shorts and use to save the game later. Instead, you're joined in your quest by a glowing orb where many of your abilities flow through that. Imagine Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, but with an angry streak and really bad aiming from time to time. As you both traverse the land, you run into a major gameplay element that Ori does insanely well compared to some of even the best platformers out there, and that's exploration. You see, to me, exploration in a platformer has to be challenging and fun no matter which way you come into a level. If a room has 3 ways to enter it, each direction you travel through that location needs to have and use the skills you have accumulated up until that point. And Ori knocks it out of the park. As you explore the world, you're going to find places you can enter or can't enter and that are locked off. And as you unlock skills, you're going to find shortcuts. But you're also going to find that those shortcuts make you traverse the world in more or less dangerous areas. And it's going to be up to you to decide which of those areas best fit the skills that you have as a gamer. You see, many times you're faced with oh yeah or oh shit decisions. Go one way to return to something you need, and you may face timed wall jumps and rebounding enemy projectiles like a glow-in-the-dark Jennifer Capriati. Go another way, and you may be forced to suffer the dangers of teleporting tree trunk crotches and landing areas for insanely difficult jumps so small that living seems to be on accident. It's this amazing interplay of gamer decision and path knowledge that makes Ori so fantastic to play. Get a new skill, new locations may be unlocked, but guess what? New dangers are too, and these dangers fit perfectly. Puzzles are festooned around the game world, like someone with a lot of time on their hands decided to build a game world that simply could not exist without an overarching god with a hilarious sense of the asinine. But that's what makes Ori so fun. The first time you fight an enemy and find out that their projectile changes speed, unlike almost any game in the history of, well, gaming, and you suddenly get an idea that Ori isn't just about exploration and discovery in the game world, but there are some fairly forward-thinking platforming elements as well. Couple that with 3 large lines of skill upgrades as well as some innate character abilities that Ori can unlock, and you have a game that hits on all cylinders while providing what I consider to be some future elements that all platformers may offer. Now, since it's a platformer, jumping's the main deal here, and I found no lag across any of the characters' moves and no worrisome soft spots or hidden animation issues that could make the game unresponsive. I still think that some locations are slightly hampered by the organic feel of the level's layouts when it comes to collision detection for static enemies, but just when frustration felt like it was welling up inside me like an ex-girlfriend's resentment, I ended up clearing the area anyway. The game's save system is a mixture of save wherever you want, but with a resource requirement as well, and let me tell you, save often, and even if you do, there's going to be a time where you can't save for various reasons, and are looking forward to an insanely difficult triple jump, teleport tree crotch fall into a 3mm wide safe zone landing. Trust me when I say you'll see this crop up enough that you're going to begin naming some areas or moves you use to navigate them like a fucking gymnast names their floor routine, kneeling, usher, embarrassment, cackling Susan Scissorhug, or one section I have forever named the Fennec Eater. The game is indeed hard, no, I mean it, and it may not look like it, but this is not a game for kids just randomly. You have to warn them first. The only reason to give this to an unprepared kid is to see what exploded children look like, because that kid's head is going to rupture within 20 minutes of playing this game, unless you make sure they know what they're getting into. The game isn't insanely hard, but it can look deceiving, and it's important that going into the game you understand just how difficult it can be at times. Additionally, with so many risks in the game world, there's bound to be one section or one enemy type that you are just flatly unprepared for. And I won't say I didn't spend a good deal of time frustrated by not making it past a section I had made it past previously, because graphically I didn't feel the game did the best job in some areas with collision detection and avoidance routines. Though those instances were rare, they did indeed pop up. Lastly is the story, and I won't give any of it away here. Needless to say, it's about loss and yearning for something more than what you have and what you are. And I felt that impact of the story throughout the levels as it sort of weaved in and out. Where Life is Strange brings a feeling of nostalgia, Dragon Age Inquisition brings a feeling of togetherness amongst tough times, Ori elicits a feeling of hope, even if the genesis of the story itself is actually sadness. Longevity. This is one of those games where the time taken is going to fluctuate between gamers on a couple different things, and really it's going to be about 10 plus hours for skilled players. And though the game isn't randomized in any way, it's massive enough and interesting enough that playing through it again doesn't seem like a hard decision, but it will be up to you and how you personally deal with platforming games that you have actually beaten. Fun factor. I had a blast. I'm still having a blast, and I'm still amazed at what I'm seeing and feeling when playing the game. It's simply perfection of atmosphere melded with insanely rewarding gameplay. If there wasn't that nagging feeling at the back of my mind concerning some locations and their collision detection, I would say the game was as close to perfect as a platformer could be. But even with that said, while exploring in Ori, there's a feeling of majesty that simply can't be explained. Sure, it's the interplay of ambient sounds, masterfully done music, and gameplay in both negative and positive spaces, but That would defeat the true triumph here, which is a game being so much more than the sum of its parts. What it does masterfully, and it's a game that offers enjoyment even in death, repeated, nut-crunching, soul-crushing, cry to your grandmother about the world's evils, death. As I'm sure you probably already guessed, this game is a buy. The game offers a breathtaking look into a unique world and has gameplay elements I expect to see other platformers use moving forward. The game has one or two rough spots that mar an otherwise almost perfect presentation, and I can't think of an Xbox One or PC gamer who in any way like platformers who wouldn't want this in their library. Of course, right next to the Oxycontin and a cuss jar filled with enough money to take the entire family to fucking Venus. So that's it for me as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you disliked it, hit dislike. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe, or do nothing. It's all okay with me. Peace out.